your builds look something like this? Well, that is about to change, because with these 8 simple steps you can transform your unfortunate looking house into a beautiful house that will have your friends wondering if you actually touch grass. So let's go! Step number 1. Find inspiration. When I asked you what you struggle with when building, you said not having the energy to build and having no idea what to build. But once you get this step done, everything else becomes a lot easier. Before you begin building, you need to choose what you want to create. Sounds simple, because it is. Could be a house, an apartment complex, a castle, or anything else really. It's hard to make a build look good without a clear vision in mind. So find some inspiration. For this step I recommend using Pinterest. I love Pinterest. I can also find goofy images while I'm on there, like this. It can also be hard to make a build slay if you don't stick to a distinct style. Building in a certain style makes it easier to find inspiration, as well as giving you some rules to follow. As an example and to demonstrate things throughout this video, I'm going to transform this ugly plain house into a beautiful pastel looking kind of house. Step number 2. Scale it up, please. This build looks interesting in an unfortunate way. So ditch that 2-block tall ceiling and make each floor at least 3 blocks tall, preferably 4, 5, 6 or even taller than that. This apartment's roof is 5 blocks tall, while this cathedral's roof is 19 blocks tall. As you can see, the height of each floor depends on what style or type of building you're going for. Step number 3. Interestify the shape. I don't even know if interestify is a word. Over 50% of you said that you struggle with the shape of your builds, but it doesn't have to be so complicated. There's just one simple thing you need to not do. Do not start a build with a shape like this. It will end up looking ugly. Instead, start with a basic shape and add other shapes to the original shape, or subtract shapes from the original shape, or do both. When you add extensions to the original shape, you're also able to vary the height of the build in different places. And there will inevitably be certain things that you struggle with building, and for me that thing is roofs. I therefore won't be explaining how to build a good roof, but I will give you this tip instead. Whenever you don't know how to build something, simply just go back to step number 1 and find some more inspiration. I found this picture which really helped me get some ideas. Shaping truly doesn't have to be complicated to make a build look great. You probably won't need to build triangles and circles unless you're building towers for a castle or going for a very specific kind of design. But if you do end up building them, I recommend using the website plot.co.uk to create spheres and circles. Triangles though, let's be real, nobody knows. Step number 4. Find a good block palette. Having a solid block palette is crucial for a good Minecraft build, but what exactly is it that makes a block palette good? A good block palette shouldn't look weird with the kind of style that you're going for. I'm building a pastel colored house, so I'm naturally going to opt for more pastel colored blocks. Which is why this block palette, for example, would be really weird. Any colors and textures that deviate from the norm in your style should be used sporadically. Now, let's talk about value. Value is how light or dark a color is. Even if 2 blocks look very different, applying a black and white filter can make them look identical because of their similar values. And if you're building with a desaturated block palette, it's important to be wary of this. Here we have an alright looking house, but when we put this black and white filter over it, we notice how dull it really looks. The values are too alike, resulting in a lack of contrast. We can improve this block palette by giving it some darker values, as well as some lighter values while still staying true to the theme. This simple adjustment makes the build actually appear interesting. You can also easily create contrast in the values of a build by changing the color of the windows to something either darker or lighter, like these black windows against this almost completely white build. Just by creating some contrast in the values, you can completely transform the look of a build and make the colors really pop. When you're making a block palette, it's also important to think of the texture of the blocks you choose. You should try to match the texture of the blocks you're using to what you're building to some degree. However, this doesn't always apply when texturing and making gradients, which I'll be talking about later. And for this step, I also gotta recommend the website blockpalettes.com. You basically find block palettes on there, and yeah. Step number 5, add depth. Adding depth is about making your build look less flat and more 3D, and it is the thing that really takes your build to another level. You may need much depth or little depth depending on what you're building and the style that you're building in. There are many things you can do to give your build more depth, like giving your roof a little overhang. It could be by 1 block, 2 blocks, 19 blocks, 35 blocks, whatever you want really. I added 1 block in the middle and 2 on the sides, and giving the edge of your roof a different color can make it look even cooler. Now bring the pillars of your house out by 1 block. You can do it like this, or like this. If your build is bigger though, you could do more than 1 block for extra depth. You can even add a little more detail to the pillars by using trapdoors, signs, and buttons. And oh my gosh, it's finally time to get rid of your ugly glass block windows. It's 2024 and you're still using glass blocks as windows? Just use some glass panes, oh my gosh. And just trust me, please just trust me. How about we detail those windows too? We can add a frame, give the windows a windowsill on the outside, and maybe some stairs. I don't have a balcony in this build, but if you do have one, make sure to give it some sort of support. That could be support columns or brackets. You don't always want to cause people's eyes to bleed, so avoid over detailing. Less is sometimes more. Some builds don't even need that much depth to look really awesome, because they may choose to focus on this next step instead. Step number 6. Texture and gradients. Texturing is using different blocks to imply that the surface isn't smooth or flat. So when the surface normally wouldn't be smooth or without cracks, it can be smart to texture it. When we texture, we take blocks that are similar in color and texture to each other and mix them together to create a more interesting look. And if you don't know where to start, here are some block palettes you can use to texture some of the most common block choices in building. Gradients. A gradient is a smooth transition from one block to another. Gradients can help big walls without much depth look more interesting. But how do you make a gradient look good? Well, first you need to actually choose the blocks. The texture of the blocks doesn't matter that much most of the time, unlike the colors. You want the colors to be similar. Now, it's obviously called a gradient, not a sudden, so don't choose vastly different colored blocks. Avoid things like sudden jumps from one color to another and hard lines. It just makes it look really odd. You want it to look natural and organic, not whatever this is. The textures of the individual blocks don't have to be true to the texture of what you're actually building. This gradient, for example, goes from moss to cobblestone, but I also have some lime terracotta in here. And since there aren't any surfaces on my example build that really need gradients, I'm only going to add some moss to the cobblestone because just like with depth, less is sometimes more. Step number 7. Give the build a story, aka details. Whenever you hear the word detailing, you might think of just placing down whatever looks pretty. But if you just do that, the smaller details won't feel as cohesive. So instead, give your build a backstory to truly make it feel alive. Ask yourself the questions. Who lives there? What is the building used for? Does the building have an interesting history? Having a simple idea of the residents' identities and the building's history can go a long way. Let me show you some examples. The people who live here value community, so they're obviously going to have balconies so they can talk to their neighbors, and the conversation pit, which is right next to their community pool. So go ahead and make up a backstory for your building or the residents that affects the details. And remember that this applies to creative building and not survival, unless you're really quirky and special, because in survival the details are more about a combination of functionality and lore simultaneously. Not that I know anything about survival though, I've beaten the dragon 0 times in my decade of playing this game. Step number 8. Surroundings. A beautiful house needs a beautiful surrounding area, so for this last step we're going to transform the surrounding area and utilize it to its full potential. First up, we're going to build a path. You just make a line with rounded edges, widen it, and then texture it. There are many different ways that you can texture a path, and here are a few. Gravel path. Make a path out of gravel and texture it with andesite and suspicious gravel. Add cobblestone on the edges, mossy cobblestone outside of that, and then moss blocks and glow lichen, however you pronounce that, over the cobble for that gradient. Oh my gosh, just look at that. Natural path. Make a path out of the path block, add some rooted dirt to the edges, and add some moss. It's that simple, and it also looks cute. Stone brick path. Make a path out of stone bricks and add cracked stone bricks to texture it. Add mossy stone bricks to the edges, then moss outside of that, and some glow lichen again. We love glow lichen here. Dirt path. Make a path out of rooted dirt, add some coarse dirt to texture it, some granite as well, and then some moss to the edges like always. Pathways are important not only because they make moving around really easy and efficient, but also because they make separated buildings feel connected, no matter how great the distance might be. A building truly isn't complete without a pathway or a road. Now that you've made your path, it's time to start decorating it, and the first step is to add some rocks, aka stone buttons, but that sounds lame, holy shit. And then you need to add some sort of lighting, cause who would choose to go down the dark path at night? I chose to make these simple garden lights with just a pole and a lantern. Look how cute! Oh my gosh! They're so simple yet so cute. But if you're building like an actual path that isn't in a garden, however, like forest type thing, I would probably go for something more lamp-posty. Like this lamppost, for example. It also looks really nice. And then again, if you're out of ideas, go back to step 1, find some more inspiration, and go back to the step you're currently at and start building. Now for the terrain, you want to round the sharp edges you see. But make sure you don't make them too perfect, because after all, nature is just nature and nature is random. And yes, these sharp edges are naturally generated, but they're ugly. They're ugly. Naturally generated doesn't always mean better. Just like with these trees. Let's talk trees now. You obviously want your building to have some trees, but you see this spruce sapling? It looks alright, but it's kind of basic. Now, if I simply extend the top of it, this change makes it look custom made and really nice. And yeah, sure, custom trees made from scratch look really nice, but who's really doing all that? So now we're simply going to make our sapling trees a little bit taller or a little bit rounder. Look at how I'm just rounding this tree. Makes it actually look nice. These adjustments to naturally generated trees make an immense difference despite how tiny they are. And if you want your outdoor space to look even nicer, add some water. Add a pond, a pool, waterfall, you're feeling really quirky, a lake even, or an ocean, I don't know. But don't forget to apply what we've talked about so far when it comes to detail, texture, and gradients to whatever water thing you choose to make. So as we can see here, although I'm just making a tiny pond, I'm also making a small gradient towards the middle with these 3 blocks. And adding some details. Now you just need to add some bushes with leaves and go crazy with the bone meal. Oh my gosh, just spam that shit everywhere. It will look nice, trust me. Trust me on this one. Just trust me. Now that you've completed all these 8 steps, take a look at your build before.
Oh my gosh, ew.
And compare it to the after. Just look at that. Oh my gosh, just... And now, the very last thing that you cannot forget. Place the crafting table next to the furnace. Hello! Thank you for watching all the way till the end of this video. Like it if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it, but subscribe either way. Parts, I don't remember if it's 4 or 5 of Building Your Commons is coming soon, and I'm also working on a few other tutorials similar to this one. Bye!